Take your ideal smartphone with all the bells and whistles that you'd love to have, the cameras, the display, the performance, the software, the battery life, starting to look like quite an expensive phone, right? Then with a massive chainsaw, start chopping away at the bits you really don't need, you know, the luxury components. Don't chop it all down, just leave what you need, and you'll end up with something like this. Something small but not too small that fits in all the performance and battery life that you could need with nothing that you don't. It makes arguably perfect use of its own space, and I can't get enough of this thing. Oh, and it costs less than half of that ideal smartphone I mentioned earlier. It's one of my favourite phones right now. It is the Google Pixel 9a, and I cannot wait for this sea of comments going, "But right, it's X% slower in this test than last year's flagship. I timed it with my stopwatch." Stop, alright? Just stop. Go and have a shower. I can smell you from here. Because the truth is that yes, this thing on paper just does not really live up to the hype, and especially when compared to similarly priced flagship killers that you get these days. But the problem with those phones is that they focus entirely on specifications, don't take into account the actual bigger picture. One, what those specs actually mean, and two, the user experience. It's all well and good having shed loads of RAM and CPU cores, but what if the phone just sucks? This isn't the case with the Pixel 9a. It's as well rounded as I believe any phone can really get, especially when you take into consideration the price, which is very important these days. It's what happens when you take into consideration what it's like to own and use day to day. And in a couple of different areas, I think it holds its own, if not beats out a few of its competition and even more expensive devices in the 9th gen Pixel range, which is pretty interesting. For ages, I've wondered why they didn't just take the smartphone and fill out the camera bump so that the body is thicker, but it means that there is no big protrusion there. And now we have a phone that makes incredible use of its footprint by stuffing more into it, and crucially, all but eradicating the camera bump. I don't know if you've had the same experience as me, consistently getting the Pixel 9 series just caught in your pocket, trying to get it in and out. It's kind of annoying. No issue with this thing. You could put a case on it, but honestly I'm not sure I'd even bother. It's built incredibly well, it's super sturdy. Maybe I'd stick a screen protector on it just so you don't start scratching up the display. But otherwise, I just don't think I'm clumsy enough to drop my phone all the time. And given the back is plastic, it's less likely to shatter as well. I think this is as strong as a smartphone really needs to be, and it certainly gives you that confidence when you hold it in your hand. Feels really nice in the hand. The flat sides aren't as big offenders as some other models, particularly from Samsung, you know, the ones that sort of dig into your hand with harsh edges. This is sort of nicely tapered into the sides, and it's not a compact phone by any means, but I think combined with the flat sides and the way that they are subtly curved, it makes for a device that feels pretty decent in the hand. I think the symmetrical bezels definitely help with the aesthetic of this thing, and I quite like the colours that you get this in, even if my model is the Panda or the Stormtrooper type design, which is black and white. It's a bit boring, but what are you gonna do? By the way, I think Google pulled this screen straight off of the Pixel 9, which is much more expensive, and they just stuck it in their A model this time around, I guess to sort of counteract the issues that previous Pixel A devices had, and honestly that is not a bad thing. The Pixel 9's and now Pixel 9a's display is lovely. It's sharp, it gets really bright, it's a very good panel, even if it is a clear step down from the Pro models, which just get that much brighter. Again, one of those specs that you see on paper and you might go, really? A low resolution display on a smartphone? But when you use it, you're like, yeah, this thing looks fantastic. Even taking pictures, like the hardware is actually technically a downgrade on last year's Pixel 8a, which is nuts. I mean, why would you downgrade the main sensor? But Google did, and honestly the 9a's images are as good as you'd expect from any normal Pixel. It remains one of the most reliable point and shoot setups you can get in a smartphone, particularly with moving subjects as well, but in pretty much any other scenario, it's fantastic. I still like Google's color science more than the likes of Samsung and particularly Apple, because there's plenty of contrast but you get all of that dynamic range, but nothing looks washed out, which is important. And there's a whole heap of different shooting modes as you'd expect from a Pixel, but honestly I just tend to stick to standard video and standard photo because I'm a bit boring like that. There's certainly a drop off in quality when you move over to the ultra wide camera, as the sensor is smaller and the whole system just isn't able to capture as much light, In good light, the ultrawide is decent, but there's not heaps beyond that, and I think the added versatility and functionality of having an ultrawide in a phone like this is all you really need. Sort of follows the whole idea of the phone. Like sure, you can have a bigger sensor, more resolution, more lenses and all of that, but what's the point if the average person doesn't care enough? If the average person looks at photos coming from an A series pixel and goes, yeah, they're really good. And that's the target demographic for this phone. And if they don't need or even use the telephoto camera in their smartphones, then what's the point? This phone costs £499 here in the UK, is already on sale in certain places for £449. Now I know that's still not nothing, and I feel like there are better ways to spend your money if you want sheer value for money, and if you're happy to peruse the likes of eBay and Facebook Marketplace. Stuff like the S23 Ultra is cheaper than this, and I think more bang for your buck. But some people want their phones on contract, or they want a warranty, or they want the in-store experience. And all of those things you get with the 9A, but you wouldn't get with an eBay S23 Ultra. And though I still recommend that phone over this, we aren't talking about the same kind of person who would be looking to buy one of those, looking to buy one of these. The 9A has plenty of performance for your general day-to-day tasks, doom scrolling, typing in Discord, checking Twitter, taking pictures. And if you have a bit of a mobile game addiction, it can play those basic games with higher end titles, doable but just not perfect. And the UFS 3.1 storage is probably the weakest link in the 9A, but even then, that has been the same as all the tensor generation Pixels. Isn't that crazy? They're using the same storage standard as the Pixel 6a, and they use that all the way in the 9 Pro XL. I'm hoping with the Pixel 10 they actually do move over to a UFS 4.0 or 4.1, because this is getting a bit long in the tooth at this point. The 9A also lasts me a full day with no problems. It's a 5100 mAh battery, which I've had people in my comment section going, 5000 mAh isn't big anymore, and like, sure, it's not a huge battery, but it's enough to get most people through a full day. That is why they designed it this way. And even though the Pixels, this one in particular, they only have sort of 23 watt wired, 7.5 watt wireless charging, it's not good enough in 2025. I'm not going to give Google a pass, but I will say that the average person charges their phone overnight with a cable. And for anyone who does that, this is more than enough charging speed. So it's clearly a good enough solution. I just wish they'd push a bit more. But sure, the OnePlus 13R wipes the floor with this thing in performance and battery benchmarks, but not only is that model considerably more expensive where I live compared to the 9A, it's also a way bigger phone with significantly worse software. Because Pixel Experience is clearly doing a big job with this device. It makes the phone feel fast, smooth, feature rich. It doesn't have every single Google Gemini AI feature, but it does still let you use Gemini and Pixel Studio and stuff like that. And the fact that Google is offering long-term software support going into 2032 makes this a great long-term option, but definitely for the right person. Not every phone is built to be the very best money can buy. Not every phone needs to support massive internal components and a headphone port and a micro SD card slot. People, it's 2025. The majority has moved on by now. You're in the minority, trust me. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm just saying your cries for the headphone port and the micro SD card slot are basically going into the void at this point. I'm with you, but they're going into the void. This phone is not for the enthusiast. It's not for many of you watching this video. It's for the average person who doesn't care what model their phone is, how many FPS it can draw in games, how cutting edge the hardware is. It's for someone who wants a relatively affordable smartphone that in a few years can continue to run their favourite apps, take good pictures, and it's for someone who charges their phone overnight and has never heard of Geekbench. The Pixel 9a is the phone that when someone asks me for a phone recommendation, I immediately dish out, because it balances good hardware and great software in a package that won't break the bank and should last you far beyond your contract period.